Welcome to the Living Well Church podcast, and thanks for tuning in today. Our mission as a church is to help people find faith in Jesus and a life of purpose and hope. You're about to watch a message that will challenge you, inspire you, encourage you, and most of all, point you to Jesus and the life of purpose and hope He has planned for you. So lean in and enjoy, and let God speak into your life.
Morning. There's somebody there. I thought that was a really interesting song we've just finished singing there, I Surrender All, when I'm going to talk to you this morning, the last in our series, about living well finance. Because there's a saying in church circles that the last thing we actually submit to God is our money, and as soon as we have a problem, it's the first thing we want to take back. So, interesting. This morning, I want to talk to those people who are part of this church and who are committed to the vision and purpose of the church. So, when we have an offering, and most of our offerings don't come through the bowl there, we are sort of in the modern world now, and most of it comes directly into the church bank account. But when we talk about the offering, and offering is worship, when we talk about that, we often say that it's for those people who are committed to the vision and purpose of the church, and that if you're a guest and if you're a visitor, then there's no obligation on you to give. Church is free for you. So probably I'm saying that about my sort of sermon this morning, that if you're a visitor or a guest, you can sit back, relax and chill. That means, I suppose, the rest of us need to pay attention. Okay. What I'm talking about this morning affects our heart. And our heart reacts differently in different situations. So sometimes when someone says something to us, and maybe it's a bit challenging, or they've said something that we haven't thought about before, our reaction is to harden our heart, and we don't want to listen to it, and we don't want to consider it. And then other times where our hearts are quite open, and we hear something and think, yeah, I'll consider that, I'll meditate on that, I'll pray about that. And that's what I would say this morning, that I would like you to have a heart that is sensitive to what the Holy Spirit is saying to you. Because in certain ways it really doesn't matter what I say, but what is the Holy Spirit speaking to you this morning? So as we look at living well financially, we're going to look at it from two perspectives. One from the perspective of church, and one from the perspective of us as an individual. So from a church perspective, I thought it'd be interesting to look at it, not what living well looks like, but what does living unhealthily as a church look like? And I think it probably looks something like this. Probably a church that's got very low income and actually no money to invest into what God is calling them to do. Maybe there's mistrust in the place about how money is actually spent or what it's spent on. Maybe there's a view that the people who actually steward the money, the people that actually look after and manage the money, are bad at it. Often maybe an unhealthy church is a place where all the money is spent just making the existing people more comfortable in their environment and in church. And money is not spent on reaching those people that are outside the church, that are outside the kingdom, that don't know Jesus. I just want to say, as a church, we are really, really open about what income we get and how we spend it. And I believe that is right, and I believe that is proper. And so for about 2 or 3 minutes, we're just going to look at our last financial year and our proposed spending and income for the next financial year. So if we could have slide 1. There's only 3 slides, so don't worry. And that's slide 1. We'll have slide 2. So on this slide, And it's not deliberately written in really small writing, so you can't actually see what it is. And actually, I'm going to send you this on email tomorrow, so you can actually have a look at it. And if the stuff you want to question, you can send an email to the office and ask your questions, and we'll get back to you. But the actual column for 2016-17, so that's the financial year that ended the 31st of March 2017, that is what we spent our money on. National expense, I'll just hit some of the big headlines. National expenses is what we send to the national church to aid the running of the national charity that we are part of, that covers all the legal, audit functions, covers the like human resources function, covers all those other functions that are carried out nationally. Next line down is salary costs. That's what we pay the people that are employed by the church, and that's everything rolled into there. So national insurance and everything goes into that figure. Rent and rates and water, that's a fairly large figure. That's for the rent of this place here. Heating and lighting, quite a large figure. Just thinking of some of the others. Premises is a big figure, so that is all the cleaning products, all the maintenance that we are responsible for on this building, and also pays for the building to be cleaned. There are various other figures down there. Which one am I looking at? The outreach one, I think it's £2,700. No, £3,388. That related to Alpha. So we actually spent about £10,000 on Alpha. We got about £6,000 in people contributing and giving us gifts, and that is the sort of net figure. So last year we spent £129,000, which is quite a lot of money, isn't it? But that's actually what it costs. That is the real cost of running church. You can see that then there's a budget for next year, which is quite a bit higher. A lot of the figures are similar, but there's a couple that I'll point out to you. One of them is the salary figure that has gone up, and that is because our heart is that we want to invest in some more ministry, and that will, over the next few months, we'll get a better understanding of what that actually looks like. But we want to do that because we believe that is something that can help us move the church forward. And then under contingency, that figure's gone up a chunk as well, and that's because we have to start thinking about capacity issues in church. We are getting relatively full on a Sunday, so there's often, in fact more often than not, there is now 150 people here on a Sunday, and we are struggling to fit in the building, and we're going to struggle to fit in the building as more people come to faith, which is my heart and my belief of what is going to happen. So we've got to start thinking about what does the future look like for us, and we don't have clear ideas, and that's why that contingency figure's gone up a bit, because some of that may come into that box at some point during the year. As some of these things unfold, we'll let you know more about it. But that's where we are at the moment. If we go on to the last slide, and that's our actual giving for last year, which it was £8,000 more than we spent, which is good. That's a positive thing, because the two previous years we spent a tiny bit more than we actually got in those individual years. So that's sort of more than balanced that up, which is good. To meet what we require going forward, we're going to need to find that figure, about 153,000, which is a challenge. And this is sort of how we've operated as a leadership team, that invariably we have not had the money to invest in the future, but we've sensed God has said, do this, and we've, in faith, done that. And God has provided the finance to allow that then to happen. And we've operated like that for a long time. But it would be interesting, wouldn't it, actually, if we had a period where we actually had more money coming in than we had going out on a regular basis, that actually we could actually put some money aside for emergencies or rainy days or whatever. So that's sort of the background of where we are. And we are trying to be good stewards. And we are trying to be a healthy church that is looking to spend money not on us, but on how we can expand the kingdom, how we can reach more people. So that is sort of what it's going to look like for the financial year from the 1st of April this year to the 31st of March next year. As I said, it would be really nice to be in a position where actually the money was there and we could just invest it, we could just spend it. And you think, yeah, well, that's a nice idea, but it's never going to happen in real life. Listen to these verses from Exodus 36. This is when they were going to first build a tabernacle, build a tent to house the Ark of the Covenant in and house God's presence in. This is what happened. And they said to Moses, the people are bringing more than enough for the construction work which the Lord commanded us to do. So Moses issued a command, and a proclamation was sent throughout the camp saying, let no man or woman any longer perform work for contributions towards the sanctuary. What that's actually saying is Moses said to them, stop giving. What a position that would be. But those people's hearts were really tuned in to what God had called them to do, and they were giving really generously. So we want to be a healthy church. We want to be a church that is spending money not internally focused, not to make us more comfortable, but spending money to expand the kingdom, to grow the kingdom, to allow us to connect with more people and bring more people into the kingdom. That's our heart, and that's why we're really open about what money comes in and where it goes to. Let's for a little while just look at it from an individual perspective. Now, one of the wisest men that I've ever heard speak is Rick Warren. And why I consider him wise is that he has a real understanding of Scripture, and he bases his decisions and he bases his wisdom on the Bible. And not only does he base his decisions on it, but he then does what he says. And for me, that's like real wisdom. So I really respect this guy. And he says, for us as individuals, there are a couple of principles which are really important for us to live by. And the first one of those is to remember that God is the source of everything I receive. Now, we think often that we are the source of everything we receive. We work hard, we should earn good money, and that we deserve it because we've worked hard. But he says, no, the fundamental principle we need to understand first of all is that we need to remember that God is the source of everything that we get. David understood this. He says in 1 Chronicles 29, King David, he says, wealth and honor come from you. You are the ruler of all things. In your hands are strength and power to exalt and to give strength to all. Now, our God, we give thanks and praise your glorious name. But who am I? This is King David. But who am I and who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? Everything comes from you, and we have only given you what came from your hand. So this is David when God has told him, you are not going to build a temple, your son is going to do it, but you are going to start the preparations for it. And he brought that to the people, and David was overwhelmed by the generosity of people. And David knew where it all came from, that it wasn't their money, that they were just giving back to God what God had already given them. I'm going to watch a little clip now of J. John, and it's pretty self-explanatory, so we'll just sit and watch it.
There was a man at an airport and he wanted to buy a bag of very small donuts and a coffee. So he buys his bag of small donuts and he buys his coffee and he's looking for somewhere to sit. But all the tables are all taken. But there's one table where there's one man sitting, and he thinks, oh, I'll just go and sit opposite him. So he goes there, he puts his coffee down, he puts his bags down, he gets his coat off, puts it on the chair, sits down, opens his coffee, has a sip, picks up the bag of donuts, opens it, takes out a donut, starts eating it, puts the bag down. The man opposite stretches over, picks up the bag of donuts, opens it, takes out a donut, starts eating it, puts the bag down, smiles. The other man cannot believe what he has just seen. He cannot believe that the man has just stolen one of his donuts. He's thinking, what is the world coming to? What is the world? But then he thinks, well, maybe, the guy's not quite there, or, he better not say anything in case the guy kind of erupts and he's violent. But he gives him one of these, if looks could kill look. He picks up the bag of donuts, he takes out another donut, and he moves it near to his coffee, as far away from the other man. While he's sipping his coffee, the man stretches over, picks up the bag, takes out another donut, starts eating it, puts it on the table, pushes it back, smiles. The other guy can't believe it. He's done it twice. He's stolen 2 of my donuts. He's amazed. He can't believe it. He's really angry. But he decides not to say anything. Anyway, the man gets up to leave. So the other man thinks it's about time you left, you donut thief. He put his coat on, he picked up his bag, he then picked up the bag of donuts. There's one donut inside. He takes it out, he breaks it in half, he puts half in his mouth, puts half on the bag, he moves the bag, he smiles, he waves, off he goes. The other guy thinks, I'm not touching that donut, you donut thief. You're probably full of infection. Anyway, he looks at his watch. Oh, it's time for me to go. He gets up, he puts his coat on, he then bends down to pick up his bag, and sitting on top of his bag was his bag of donuts. He was complaining that the other man was stealing his donuts, when in fact the other man was sharing his donuts. Now, listen to me. God owns all the donuts. And we're complaining, and God owns all of them. He owns all the donuts. Listen, every week we get a bag of donuts. God gives us a bag of donuts every week. Inside there are 10. God says, take one of the 10 and give it to the church that you go to. Okay, that's called tithing. Okay? So, you give a donut to the church that you go to. Right? They're God's donuts, so don't complain. They're all God's donuts. He just says, give one to the church that you're part of. So important, isn't it? Yeah, now you're left with 9, and you need 11. Hey, I need 11, I've just given one away. I've only got 9. And what is incredible is, if you need 11 or you need 12, somehow, the 9 becomes 12. Somehow the 9 becomes what you need. Honestly, a lot of people in Britain haven't heard the Sermon on the Amount. They haven't. Honestly, a lot of British Christians squeeze the pound so tightly they make the Queen cry. You got 10 donuts. God says, give a donut to the church that you go to, and you got 9 now. See? 9. Some of us need more, and it either stretches or somebody comes along and says, could I give you 2 donuts? And you say, oh, yes, please. Now, some of us got 10 donuts, we give 1 to the church, now we're left with 9. And we don't need 9. There are many people here, I would say thousands of us here, that we need 11. But I would reckon there are thousands of us here who don't even need 9. And so what does God say? Right, I want you to give a donut to Joyce Myers so that she can go on TV every day. So you give 1 of your donuts and you become a monthly supporter. Yeah? And then something else happens. You know, there's a need, or this orphanage, or compassion, or World Vision. And you think, oh yeah, and God says, give a donut. Listen, we all get the quiver in the liver. And you and I cannot outgive God. And when you act on it, he responds. So what we've got to do is to say, Lord, they're all your donuts. What do you want me to do with them? What do you want me to do with them? And if you've got a spare donut, give it to me. I'll have it.
So if you forget everything else, remember that God owns all the donuts. But that's just trying to explain those verses that I read you, that the source of everything we have is God. The second thing that Rick Warren says is the second principle we really need to understand is that we need to honor God with our first. And I've just said that Rick Warren's really wise, but I just want to add something to what he said. So I want to say that we need to honor God with our first and best. And there's a really good reason why I say that. So if you look back into the idea of tithing, you look back into the idea of people giving back to God, we're back into the children of Israel in an agricultural setting. And they were asked to give the first of the harvest back to God. They were asked to give the first of the livestock back to God. But it wasn't the leftovers. And it was really clear that it was never the leftovers that we gave to God, that they gave to God. It was always the first from the harvest, the first from the newborn cattle and sheep, etc. It was the first and the best. The instructions were that it had to be the spotless lambs. It had to be the best, the first and the best. And this is a really wise concept. This is a really wise practice. And I'll tell you why. This is my personal experience. I've tithed since I was a child. I had that idea in my mind. I made that decision that I would do that when I was a child, and I've carried on doing it. But what I learnt was, if I got paid and I just spent money on various things, when I got to the end of the month, there was never enough left for the tithe, ever. And what happened is I then went, oh, I'll pay you that much, God. Then next month I'm going to have to pay the tithe and a bit more to make up for it. And that is reality for most of us. If we do not give God the first and the best, we tend to end up giving God the leftovers. And that is not what we're asked to do. And that is not the principle that Rick Warren talks about. And it's a really sound principle. In Luke 16, Jesus says this: if you are faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. If you are dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibility. So Jesus is saying that he understands us. He understands that if we are faithful with small things, we will be faithful with bigger things. But if we're not faithful with small things, we won't when the amounts change. Jesus goes on to say, if you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? That's quite a hard statement, isn't it? That if God can't trust us with worldly wealth, how can he trust us with things of the kingdom? What these verses bring out is this idea about, do we have like an earthly mindset, or do we actually have like a heavenly kingdom mindset? Because whatever our mindset is will affect how we live. I'm going to ask Penny to come up now, and Penny's just going to share an experience that she's had about having a heavenly mindset, not having an earthly mindset. And I've given her 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm really going to try and do this in 3 minutes. Okay, so I should probably start at the beginning. Just a bit of background for people who don't know Lee and I. I gave my life to the Lord at 14. Lee found the Lord about 17 years ago, but I wouldn't say either of us really followed the Lord. I wouldn't say that really happened until about 12 years ago, when we realised we were really rubbish at running our own lives, and said, Lord, actually, we really need you to intercede and do that for us. So, God being God, and how wonderful and faithful that he is, started to mend us as broken people. So through counselling, through ministry, and lots of other ways, he started to fix us bit by bit. He didn't ask anything from us. He just wanted to fix us. During all this time, we never tithed. We never made ends meet. We probably earned quite a bit of money. We used all the money. We never really gave to anything. But we also, as we moved on, created more debt for ourselves. We loved ourselves by buying things for ourselves. And we just couldn't make ends meet every month. So then God started to talk to us about finances. We started to watch a few of the preachers on TBN. And I can't really remember the defining moment, but as we couldn't make ends meet and things weren't really working, we said, all right then, Lord, we better start doing as we're told. So we started to tithe. Now, we still didn't do it regularly. We did do the 10%, but we still didn't do it regularly. We basically worked it around our own finances, as Marcus has said earlier. And we weren't really seeing much change. We still couldn't make ends meet. And probably quite pathetically, we thought we were really due something because we'd started to tithe occasionally. Anyway, we felt really convicted then. We'd moved on again. So we said, no, what we've got to do is we've got to put the 10% in. We've got to do it at the beginning of the month. We've got to send it with our blessing and our love and pray over it and just give God what he is owed back out of what he's already given us. Like J. John says, it's already his. So we started to do that. And then the exciting things started to happen. So Lee started to go from strength to strength in his job, in his career. We had bonuses that were met that should never have been met because the targets weren't met. We were able to afford extra things for ourselves. But then a really wow moment happened. So in 2012, somebody gifted us a house, which after all of the emotion of that had calmed down a little bit. We sat on the house for a while, and we made about an £80,000 profit on it when we sold it. So after giving 10% to the Lord first, we were then able to go on a holiday, pay off all of our debt. We were still making all our ends meet. We were then into a surplus. So then it was like, what do we do with that, Lord? So some of that has gone into Dover School for All Nations, Kingdom Preschool, and then all the surplus that we've been using there on since. Now, I don't know how that happened. All I know is that we paved the way for the true righteousness, which is God's, which is the tithe. It is giving back that 10% to him and saying, Lord, have it, do with it what you want. And all of these other things were just added unto us afterwards. It works, folks. You know, so we've got to give the glory to the Lord. He is just awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. If it was pretty close. That's really good. So there's something about having a heavenly mindset. There's something about it, not just us being like really earthly minded, really just focused on us and focused on the things we see, but can we actually trust God with our finance? I don't think I actually want to add any more to what's been said. I just want to remind you of two things. One is, remember that God is the source of everything we have. Everything we have is because God has given it to us to look after. We never own it. Okay? It's never really ours. We're just looking after it. And that we need to honor God with our first and best. So I want to leave you with just a few questions to just think about and just to ponder on this morning and during the week. So the first one is where is your heart in terms of the kingdom? Is the kingdom a priority in your life? Because if it is, it will affect your time, your finances, and everything else. So ask God to reveal to you by His Spirit, what are the priorities in my life, Lord? Where does the kingdom come? Is it the priority? Second thing I want to ask you to think about is, what is God really speaking to you about this morning in terms of giving? What is He challenging your spirit with? And how will you respond to that challenge? And the last thing I want to say is that when we invest in the kingdom, it's the greatest investment we could ever make, because when we invest in the kingdom, we're investing in eternity. You can invest in a bank, in stocks and shares and all sorts of stuff, but when you die, none of those things are going to have any value at all. When you invest in the kingdom, when you invest in people in the kingdom, they are going to have eternal outcomes.